Welcome back to the Eclectic Collection. Today we have episode 29, The Mexican Promise. This is long overdue. I can't believe I haven't told this story before. It's so readily available in my mind, and I tell almost every class this story, and certainly the beginning of every night class I've taught adults, and every beginner, intro, and exploratory class. And yet, for some reason, I didn't think to tell all of my eclectors out there. Our story takes us to 1986. It's funny. I was in 7th grade, so do the math on that if you want. It was a wonderful time back then. Video killed the radio star and such. And it's interesting because my teacher, who was fantastic, phenomenal, effervescent, just loved her. I was in a K-8 Catholic school, so your homeroom, if you will, teacher would do multiple subjects with you throughout the day. And she was my English teacher and my history teacher, religion, etc. And one of the things that she happened to do, even though we didn't have access at the time to very many electives, we had like typing, and they forced the girls into sewing, which I hated, and did 2 projects, and it was horrific. But to this day, Mom still wears the poodle skirt. But we didn't really have electives. And my teacher happened to be pretty proficient in Spanish. Now, I don't know if this is because she studied it in school or what, but she would always drop a word here or there, or say a couple things, or write, que bueno or something on your paper. And although she didn't per se teach it, she would drop some words in. And it was cool and it was fascinating. She was a very energetic teacher, and I liked her a lot. So occasionally, my sister would see my papers coming home, and, how to get your parents to sign your papers. And she would say, oh, she speaks Spanish. I said, a little bit, She had traveled a lot and just liked it, and I guess kept the language. I never really pursued the information. But around that time, my sister went to Mexico with some friends. And I feel like she traveled a lot at that time. Of course, she was, in her 20s at that time, and I'm oops baby. So, of course, I was behind in age at that time. I was like 13-ish. And she had been traveling, and she went to, I think she did a cruise, and then later, I think that was spring, and then later on in the summer, went to Mexico. And she had a great time. As a result of going to that trip, she was all interested in everything Mexican culture, speaking Spanish, possibly going back, and she was just really enthusiastic about it. And to the point where even my teacher would, help translate a few things or explain some basic Spanish. And, growing up Italian, I didn't know Spanish. I mean, I knew a couple words that my teacher taught me, or the basic, like, uno, dos, tres, cuatro from Sesame Street, but that was about it. So we weren't at a point to take linguistics. That came later when you went to high school. So that whole, year or two, I heard all about Mexico. It was great. Wonderful trip. Fine. 8th grade comes, and I have to choose what language I'm going to take in high school. And at that time, all of your Archdiocesan of Philadelphia Catholic schools pretty much had 4 choices: English, Spanish, German, and at the time Latin, which has since gone by the wayside. A few schools in Philadelphia had Italian. I really wanted to take Italian. I am Italian. I wanted to learn to say things correctly. We'll do an episode about that because there's just too many funny words. Everybody speaks food, but nobody's accurate. And, they didn't have it. So I was kind of bummed. And I wasn't really enthusiastic about any language but that. So I went home all fee-fi-fo-fum one day, and I said to my sister, I really want to take Italian. I can't. I don't know what to do. And she said, well, what are your choices? And I told her. And she said, well, what are you going to be, like a pastry chef or an Olympic announcer? So French is out. True. At the time, French was still a little more used, and they still called it in the 80s the international language, but we've since replaced that, and other than the Olympics for whatever reason. And again, pastry chef usage is really, it's not, you got to look for it, unless you're going to Canada for fun, or you're going to France, obviously. No disrespect, it's just not as widely used in the U.S. And who knew back then that it would be so much more, Spanish would be so much more used in the United States. German, I'm not going to make pretzels for a living. I have no German heritage. I'm not going to hang out in Germantown, which I guess that's where it's got its name. But, that was a no. And Latin was sort of being phased out. You could study it, But unless you were going to be a doctor, they really didn't push it. Of course, the SATs, it would always help you for root words, but they were trying to phase it out, and I knew that I wouldn't necessarily be able to continue. And the rule at the time was that you had to have at least 2 years consecutively of a language to graduate from high school and get into whatever college. Now, if you were going to go to a place that was, I'll say supersonic, you wanted to go to Harvard, Yale, whatever, Ivy League and whatnot, they encouraged you to have as many AP classes and as many credits and languages that you could. But for the normal person, you needed to. So my sister says to me, well, obviously Spanish. And I thought, okay. And I kind of checked off the paper and, yeah, whatever. I wasn't enthusiastic anymore. I sort of lost my my spirit for it. And I went in the next day and I turned in the paper. So seeing that I was melancholy at best about it, she says to me a few days later, well, you should be really psyched. You get to learn Spanish. It'll be great. I just went there, had a really good time. It was fun, but I wish I knew more. And I was like, okay, I wasn't really buying it. And she said, well, look, I'll make you a deal. I love deals, so I'm all ears. She says, if you take 4 years, I'm like, whoa, hold the phone. I have to take 2, and I just noticed that. She's like, okay, I get it, but that's just normal people. Take 4, get really good at it, and when you graduate, I will take you on a trip to Mexico. So I'm like, sweet, because I like to travel, and there was my carrot, and I was the donkey following it. So, I'm excited. I have a reason and a motivation to study this. Great. Plot is set in motion. 1988, it begins. I start at high school. I liked the class. Loved Sister Mary Frances every day. She had really cool bulletin boards and these little paragraphs up, and I always used to try and read them and see, what I could figure out just from the gate, like whether or not I could figure out ages and descriptions and people's names and things. And there was a lot you could deduce because it's very cognitive, words that look and sound alike in English and Spanish. So I did pretty well, and I liked it. And it was fun, it was different, and I realized quickly, as far as a skill set, it would not only be invaluable, it was the way that the United States was going. And just a little fun fact, at the time, we were the 5th largest Spanish-speaking country in the world, and now we're the 2nd. So that's gone up a bit in a few years. And I'd like to point out that we're technically not a Spanish-speaking country, so it's an interesting statistic because there are 20 Spanish-speaking countries where that's their main language, not freaks like me that learned it, people that wake up and speak Spanish naturally. And the United States is not technically one of them because we actually have no language. If you look it up, it'll say multiple, varied, or none English preferred, which is funny for all those people that say, oh, we're in America, speak English. I say, read a book. So you don't really have a language per se, where if you look up Italy, it says Italian. If you look up Greece, it says Greek, obviously. Some do have others, but we really technically don't have one. So a little fun fact to tuck in your brain. So at the time, I'm doing well, I like it, and I realize academically, this is right up my alley. Study your words, get an A. Don't study, flunk. I like even Steven black and white statistics. I am a memorizer. Language equals memorization. Any monkey could memorize words because all you had to do was sub out your English words for the words in your other language. And in this case, Spanish is actually the easiest language in the world to learn. There's a very simple grammar base, and in many cases is easier than English. So I did fantastic. Loved it. Went on to level 2. Loved it. And it came the time where I could bail, or I could go on, no whammy, stop, go for the big prizes. And I did. Went on to level 3. It did get tougher, but no problem. And I had a fantastic set of teachers. Not only were they enthusiastic and fun and made it worth doing to me, it was practical. It was always presented to me as a skill. But I was very blessed to have teachers from all different ways, parts, understandings, so that some had learned it as I was. Some were natives. I had junior and senior year at the same teacher, and she spoke 7 languages and had no detectable accent of any sort whatsoever. Was actually Ukrainian, but you wouldn't know it the way she spoke Spanish or English or anything. It was fantastic. As I went on, I really had luck with the language. I graduate. I look at my sister. I graduated June 3rd, 92. I look at my sister the day after, getting ready to have my party. I said, when are we leaving? She said, about that. Did I say that I was going to take you after 4 years? I said, yes, you did. She said, okay, well, it's, pricey and things have gone up a little bit. So how about you go on to college, as I was going to anyway, and study 4 more years, get really good at it, become fluent, and then I'll take you on an even bigger trip when you graduate from college. She's my sister. Why would she lie? So I'm like, okay, I was disappointed, but at the same token, here I am following the carrot thinking, of course, that makes a lot of logical sense. And at that point, I was truly invested and I liked it. I was smart enough to know that it would be a waste to leave it behind. Because I hear so many adults say to me, oh, I studied X amount of years of fill in the language and I can't speak a word. And that breaks my heart because if you remembered how to ride a bike or you played a sport, you might not be as agile as you were, but you would still remember the rules and how to do those skills. So why would language be any different? If anything, it's academic, so it should be easier because it's in your brain and your muscles aren't involved. But people say that all the time, and it just makes me sad. I couldn't see investing time into learning something, especially if you like it and you want to, only to lose it and have it go by the wayside. To me, that's just sad. I mean, it's like knowing an instrument and then not picking it up anymore, or being a painter and never painting anything or drawing anything. So I go on to school, and I am technically supposed to be an English major, and I did go in as that. But a funny little thing happened along the way. I met a fantastic professor who I'm still in touch with to this day, and he said, I looked at your transcript, and you have some Spanish. I said, yeah, I do. I said, funny thing is I always wanted to study Italian. We didn't have it. He's like, well, I'd like you to take this test. I was like, what test? He says, well, it's like a placement test. And I have to be honest, I planned on kind of going in, taking a lower level, so I knew I'd have an easy A and not have to think. Well, that plan got away from me quickly. I took the test. He comes back to me 2 days later, and he says, yeah, we're going to take you out of all the introductory and all the intermediate classes, and we're going to put you in the upper level 300 level classes. So you could actually have a minor within a year if you want it. And I really think you should major. And I said, well, hold the phone. I was planning on taking like imbecile level 1. He goes, oh, no. You've obviously had all that. No, you definitely, you want to go out. You'll be good. You'll be good. Just take it. Just trust me. And I did like him and respect him enough that I did. I was terrified because I was a freshman going in with ostensibly junior and seniors for the most part. And I thought, oh my God, I'm not going to know what I'm doing. It took about 15 minutes in the first class for me to realize I knew a lot more than many of those people. And it wasn't necessarily because I was better. It was because I had had it and was fresh from the situation. A lot of these kids were getting ready to graduate, maybe lapsed in for a year or two, took it in high school for a long time, let it go for a year, picked it back up, or it was a second language for them, and they had something else. So I was in this pool of brainy kids that had a clue, but I was so stellarly shining because I was never out of the mix. I never lost my stride, if you will. So every class, I felt like I was playing pressure luck. Am I going to get through it? Okay, no whammies. And I was doing well. And they're very, very enthusiastic people, I have to say. Like, you have to foster and encourage languages. And if you like them, you're in, and you want to help anybody who does want to learn. And that whole department was certainly that way. So I was like, yeah, keep going, keep going. So I declared a minor, which lasted for about a minute because I turned into a major, which is funny because psychology came along later, and I'm the only freak that I know that triple majored English, Spanish, psychology, and minored in Italian, but talk about that another day. So I go through every course I can take for the minor, and they're like, no, keep going, keep going. So it gets to a point where I exhaust the classes, and I see my professor. I said, I think I only have the senior project left, which it was before I was a senior. So what do I do? He's like, well, you finish it out and you get the degree. And you did it sooner. You're welcome. I made you take that test. I said, well, thank you, but I really don't want to lose my language. And he goes, well, you just study another one. And he said it so matter-of-factly that it wasn't arrogant by any means, but it was really cool to hear because I thought, oh, yeah, obviously, idiot, what was I thinking? And he's like, well, you told me you always wanted to study Italian. You just start Italian, like, obviously. I thought, oh, okay, yeah, I did want to do that. So I did. I was, again, concerned I would get confused or whatever, but I didn't. I liked it. It's very similar, more so in the nouns, but it's similar. It actually follows a bit of French, sort of the way with the verbs, but it was neat. The only strange thing about Italian is that it pluralizes with vowels, so you don't have the simple SES that you do in English, but again, so many similarities. I just learned to think in yet another language. And it was really cool. And that sparked me looking into a little bit of sign, trying to pick around. I would always help out the French kids, listening to them for projects and things like that. I certainly don't speak French, but I would try and help out. I would listen to anybody that spoke Portuguese or anything close in the Romance languages, and even just look at Latin to see what I could pick out and read. And I just liked it, and I kept it, and I do have a love of languages, and I think everybody should. And even if you think you're not going to be good at it, you know what? Try it. There's so many free apps and things out there now. Why not? So I graduate, 1996, and I have my many degrees, and I went through my graduation ceremony, and the next day I look at my sister, and I said, when are we leaving? And at this point, it had become a joke over the last 4 years. And she looked at me with all sincerity, and she's like, oh, come on. You know everything. You got all that language. You know what you're talking about. Like, at this point, you're going to get a great job, and you're going to take me to Mexico. And I'm like, whoa, when did the rules change? Like, he told me to do this. So, obviously, I wasn't going to go. And at that point, I don't think I was necessarily holding out to believe that she was still going to take me. However, it has always been a source of contention. So I swore to her that day that henceforth and forevermore, I would always start every class that I ever taught with the introduction lesson, and the introductory lesson being about how I learned Spanish on a lie, which is completely true. And at the time when I came out of school, not thinking I was going to end up in education, to be honest, I was teaching for fun adults at night, really just to keep my language. And I taught Spanish at 7 o'clock and Italian at 8 o'clock. What's funny is that, to me anyhow, the clientele was interesting because it was either retirees for fun, adults that wanted to do that for fun, or some kids that were in high school or college that wanted extra help or just wanted to do stuff for fun. There was always the fun factor, or travel. But where the Italian classes really fell into chefs, people that were interested in music and opera and had to learn lyrics to sing, or somebody's grandmother passed away and they wanted to know all the recipes and words that they knew. That's kind of how it always was with Italian. Spanish was much more practical. So many foremen, bosses, doctors, real estate agents, people in hotel, restaurant, hospitality, people in landscaping, people in telephones at the time. You really saw that was the beginning of the surge for everything with cell phones. And these people wanted to broaden their markets, talk to different target demographics. They wanted to be able to learn niche words in different jargon for different careers. And I saw a lot more in the, I can get a raise if I know how to do this, or I can be paid more, or I can market myself better. So it was an interesting difference in demographic. Of course, I still had people that were traveling and wanted to do it for fun or better their SAT words, but that's what I saw. So I just taught for fun to keep my language because I never wanted to not have someone to talk to or explain. And, They say you remember best what you teach the most, which I believe is true. So, I never got to go to Mexico. I've taught 25 years now, and only about 4 years ago did I finally take myself. I've been to Spain, done Europe several times, but it's kind of like a sore spot with Mexico. Now, here's the flip side. My sister would argue that I got back at her. This was not my intent nor my plan, and I assure you that is not what's happening. But in December of 96, shortly after I graduated and started teaching these courses, she had the nicest dog, and if you ever listened to the episode Chronicles of Fur, Mandy dog was the first dog. I believe she got her in 1991. Real sweet pound puppy that we happened to luck out and find at the SPCA, half collie, half Sheltie. Pure Lassie dog, sweet dog, really nice dog. Mandy was starting to get up there in age, and I thought to myself, ooh, pets are small tragedies. I should purchase another one to have in the pipeline of dogs, because life is a series of dogs and different checks and different cars. And if you're not getting different checks and different cars every time you buy checks and the cars, you should really do that. So we always liked collies and Shelties. We had one growing up. Brownie was the first doggy I ever had. And I thought, well, she's been talking about a Shetland sheepdog, which is still in that Sheltie collie line. But I'll go out to Lancaster because my sister's birthday is Christmas, and I'll get her this dog that she wanted for Christmas. She was very specific. She wanted a female, brown and white, miniature Shetland sheepdog. Basically, the theory was that it wouldn't exceed, say, 25 pounds, and that it would be, obviously, a puppy at first, but it would live a little longer because they say that smaller dogs live longer. Well, I would go that night to Lancaster with my friend with no GPS system or cell phone to speak of, and I would procure Molly, the toy collie. The thing about Molly, the toy collie, is that, first of all, I had no clue where I was going. My friend was a chronic shopper. I said, look, point the way to Lancaster. By the grace of God, I got to the town. The man that I purchased the dog from is Amish, and they don't use phones, and they don't really use technology. So there was a gas station at the corner where you would turn in. If you've ever been to Lancaster, Pennsylvania, there's like a system of grids and roads, some dirt in many cases, that kind of goes down. There's like a little main turnoff, and you just see houses and farms and silos and cornfields everywhere. It's off the main road. So once you turn off the actual highway, there's just miles and acres of land and different farm owners, etc., all of which are named Petersheim, Stoltzfus, very, very many. That's like the Smith and Jones in Amish world. Well, they're not permitted technology. So to make phone calls, they would have to go to the main road, generally by horse and buggy, and use the gas station at the time, had a pay phone or its phone, and they would give a small amount of money to the shop owner, and they would let them use their phone, and they would put ads in the paper, litter of dogs, 4 females, 2 males, such and such farm, and they would either give you coordinates or just tell you, like, oh, make a left at the 3rd silo. Well, good luck. It's very easy to get lost in Lancaster. And they would have an agreement. They often barter, so they would share things or give goods and services to the shop owners. So I called up the random gas station. The guy said, oh, yeah, he comes in every day. I said, well, look, tell him I want a dog. So the next day was the 23rd. I said, I want to come out here. It's like an hour and a half away. I'm going to try and find it. And he said, yeah, meet me at my shop. I'll tell you how to get there. So I find the gas station, and I go to get the dog. And when I pull up, and I brought Mandy dog with me because I wanted her to like sniff out the puppy because she had to live with it, not me. I get there. There's this, finally find it, huge barn. They open the doors, and out comes a barrage of little mini Shetland sheepdogs. Beautiful puppies, probably about 10, and one big fat cat in the corner that just looked miserable and hated his life. I think he got to the point where he thought he was a dog. And they had farm animals everywhere. And I looked at 2 or 3, and I'm like, oh, that one's cute. That one's really cute. And as I went to sort of eye up which one, and I have Mandy on a leash, the owner, the farm owner, says to me, "You want a female?" I said, "Yes." And he said, "Okay, that one, or that one?" Well, all three females were black and white. And she expressly wanted a brown and white dog. Mandy had what we call sable coloring in collie world. It's like iridescent white fur almost, brown, like a sable brown, and undercoats of black. They're very, very hairy dogs. They're long-haired dogs. They shed a lot. We have tumbleweeds everywhere. And I looked at the three doggies, and the one kind of had very strange markings. I thought, okay, no, not you. So I narrowed it down to the two, and I really looked at the one, and this one little black and white doggie stepped forward, and she looked like Pepe Le Pew. She was skunky dog if I ever saw her. Boy, did we give that dog nicknames. She just really had pure white legs with a black body and a little white face with a perfect black stripe down her nose and little black ears tipped in white. And she just had like a perfect set of markings. She was a cute little dog. And I thought, I will take that one. Because at that point, I was not going home without a dog after that adventure. And I thought, you know what? You'll learn to love it. And that was that. It wasn't because I was trying to get back at her, although she will tell you differently. So I got her home, and of course she saw it, and she loved the doggie. And, there went Molly the toy collie in future. By the way, she grew to be 45 pounds. So much for that miniature thing. And she was always kind of a little squeamy. But sweet dog, very nice dog. And Mandy was the perfect teacher. She just followed her along. But to this day, when something goes wrong, or let's say I go to procure something for my sister, she'll be like, "Oh, yeah, well, I asked for 2 of these. You brought me 1." Or, "Oh, I asked you for a couple batteries the other day. You forgot to bring it from the house. Oh, thanks. Brown and white, black and white." She always throws that in my face. So I said, you know what? Don't even get me started. Because Mexico. That's all I'm going to say to you is Mexico. And as far as I'm concerned, you started it. That was your fault, and that was first. So Mexico, Mexico, Mexico. I don't want to hear about brown and white, black and white. You loved her. She was a good dog. And I was not coming home with another dog. So that's kind of where we were with that. Definitely was not a planned event, but that's always the combative answer. Oh, brown and white, black and white. So, yeah, bottom line, she got a black and white dog. And it might not have been a brown and white dog. But you know what? I got nothing. So I guess Costa Rica would have been fine. Or the Dominican. Sure, they would have been fine. Alternatives. At least you got a dog. That's all I'm saying. Anyway, I'm not bitter. Not at all. It's only been how many years? So I can't believe I haven't told this story before. But it was very long overdue. Anyhow, if you like my shenanigans and you enjoy listening to my crazy antics, then check us out at the eclecticcollectionpodcast.com or follow us on your preferred platform. I'm Terry Tenaglia. Thanks for listening.